Okay, fourth attempt here. Hey guys, Graham, what's cracking? Fire and Brimstone is what's cracking. This is a book by Michael Punke. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, and I don't care. We'll just call him Mickey Punk from now on. This is a book about a mining accident in Butte, Montana in 1917. And if you're asking yourself, why is this one particular incident important, there are some things that came out of it that are worth analyzing. Obviously, when you're studying history, we try to get the most impactful events covered at all times. But the more you dig into the details and you study smaller events and see how things are interconnected, you realize, what's the individual value of lesser things that don't get covered so much. And this was an event that was worth studying. I myself worked in not mining directly, but in, we'll say, mining adjacent industries for about 5 years. To the extent where I had to be MSHA certified to work those jobs. MSHA is the mining equivalent of OSHA. It was started up, I want to say, in the 1930s in the wake of a really bad mining accident out in coal country, either Virginia or West Virginia. Some system collapsed somewhere, and I want to say they had close to 400 fatalities in one incident. It was just bad. And it got to the point where they needed a regulatory body to cover it. Well, this one was about 20 years before that. And it was kind of exacerbated by a whole bunch of other stuff going on in the world. 1917 was right around the time America entered World War I in earnest. Draft cards and draft boards, all that stuff was going around. Any able-bodied man was expected to enlist or be drafted. And it was also a time for socialist and Marxist agitation. This event, this mining accident that happened in Montana, was just a few months after the Bolsheviks had their uprising in Russia and got rid of the Romanovs, the Tsar. So things worldwide were pretty chaotic. So this one little tiny town in Montana was still somehow feeling the effects of it. Draft boards were raising up and wanting to harvest any able-bodied man they could out of the mining operators. And there were also socialist agitators coming in and kicking things off with the unions and trying to get people active in that cause. They were mining copper, which, aside from gold and silver, it was a precious metal, but it also had a very practical application outside of just everybody wanting it. Silver was a little bit less valuable than gold just because it required more industry to process it and get it out. And that attributed to the higher processing cost contributed to the lower final sale price or value, I guess. I'm getting out into the weeds. What was the accident, Graham? Tell us about the accident. The accident was a result, really, of the technology that they had at the time for mining. It all kicked off when a couple of mine inspectors went deep underground. This wasn't open pit mining where they'll cut off the entire top of a mountain to get to the valuable stuff inside. They'll drill a shaft looking for a vein of valuable material and then snake out all through the mountain to find that material, in this case it being copper. And they found it, but when you get deep underground, you hit pockets of gases. You've got gases that you're using for operating machinery. There are all kinds of concerns, and when you're not equipped with electrical lights, but instead you're using carbide lanterns that are literally open flames on your head, it's a pretty easy way to find any gas pockets that you might be dealing with. Also, the electrical wires that they used at the time were, obviously not insulated with rubber and everything. They were just copper and lead, basically. All of this led to a a scientifically hazardous condition where, it was not hard for an explosion to go off at any time. Coupled by the fact that miners were often the poorest and the most heavily concentrated percentages of immigrants and stuff, you ended up with lots of groups of guys that didn't all speak English. Finns, Germans, Poles, stuff like that. And so you'd have pockets of guys running around in these winding mining tunnels and stuff that couldn't understand each other. And even among the guys that could speak English, not all of them could read or write. And you had a perfect storm of conditions that led to a high mortality rate. And, something like 30 guys were killed and over 160 were injured. And it took about a week to get everybody out and get the final mortality count settled. There were people that got false reports of loved ones dying and found out later that their loved ones were alive, and the vice versa. So it was just a chaotic thing that impacted the town and the industry, and was also affected by global events with the World War going on, the draft, the union agitators and stuff. One of the very valuable takeaways from this book was also seeing the tactics that the unions used and the government used, and basically the false flag type stuff. They'd plant people in crowds. They'd try to get people in trouble. Hey, if you ever heard of a guy named, if I even say his name, this video will probably get demonetized. There was a Fetty boy in the protests on a certain day in January a couple of years ago, who, while everybody else was getting their rights stripped away and locked in prison for the most violent thing that's ever happened on American soil, this guy got a slap on the wrist for 6 months because he was a federal agitator in the crowd, setting people off. When you read about accounts like that happening in this book about a mining incident in 1917, you realize that the government has been up to this for a while, and they all suck. Anyway, probably the key takeaway at the end was that one of the men who survived the incident was then kind of catapulted into statewide fame. His name was B.K. Wheeler. He ended up becoming a senator for 4 6-year terms. He was in the Senate for 24 years. And in the epilogue, in the afterword, Mickey Punk talks about how Wheeler was on the short list for FDR's VP in the 1944 election. And this got my attention because I have read, why am I blanking his name? David McCullough's biography of Harry S. Truman. I think I read that one back in 2019. And he also covered that process of the kind of internal stealth campaign amongst 4 Democrats to be the new VP on FDR's ticket for his 4th election. He was replacing his vice president. I can't remember who the guy was before that, but knowing what his health concerns were and everything, these Democrats knew that whoever became the VP was going to basically become the next president. And FDR was considering B.K. Wheeler, but he was too vocal in his anti-war stance on World War II. I'll leave it to you to read to see how that whole thing played out, but it was a fantastic thought experiment. And while we're studying the larger movements of American history, the what if question about B.K. Wheeler probably doesn't get a whole lot of attention, which is fine. I mean, if you were to explore the what ifs instead of the what dids, that'd be an entirely different field of study. I mean, there are entire YouTube channels dedicated to alternate history. It's entirely possible that we might not have dropped the bombs on Japan if B.K. Wheeler had ended up becoming president. And who knows what that would have led to. But all of this happened because it was affected by one mining explosion in Montana in 1917. Kind of nuts. Why is this freaking security guard blocking the way to work? Anyway, 5-star book, great nonfiction. I'd been putting it off because I haven't been reading nonfiction a lot lately. I've been trying to find a great friction book. I don't read romantasy. A great fiction novel, but I've been in a bit of a book hole, so I finally read this one, and I ended up burning through it in 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever. So great stuff. I got another one by him that I'll read sometime down the road. We'll check it out. Drive safe. See you out there.